Hello there, everyone. So welcome to the Comparative Literature and Translation Studies live Q&A. And so we're here today to talk about those programs and student life at Glasgow. And we're here to answer your questions. So please do put the questions in the chat, and they will pop up here in the studio, and we'll try and answer them in the flow of things. So probably the best thing to do is to start by a quick introduction of everybody. So I'll start, as I'm already speaking. My name is Jonathan Evans. I am Senior Lecturer in Translation Studies here at Glasgow. Magda.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Magda Kampert. I'm lecturer in Translation Studies at Glasgow.
Shanti.
Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Shanti Graheli, and I'm Senior Lecturer in Comparative Literature at the University of Glasgow.
Iris.
Hi everyone, I'm Iris Lipari, and I'm a current student in the MLitt Comparative Literature program.
Thanks, Iris. Chloe.
Hi, I'm Julia Hartley. I'm a lecturer in Comparative Literature at Glasgow. Welcome. Jonathan, you're muted.
Yep. Back to the days of 2020 there. So just before we start answering questions, Shanti and I will quickly introduce our programs. I mean, I'm sure you've looked at the materials that are already available and read up on the programs from our website, but just briefly, we'll remind you what they're about. So Shanti, do you want to go first for the MLitt Complit?
Yeah, so our MLitt program, as all taught programs at the University of Glasgow of the duration of 1 year, it's 180 credits program, and this is divided in 3 chunks. You take 2 core courses, 1 per semester, and 2 options per semester, and then you do your dissertation over the summer. And our course is very theoretical and really wants you to think about how we interpret and analyze and study literatures and cultural productions more generally. In the first semester, we work specifically with literary theory and criticism. You'll be encouraged to develop your own first independent project in the essay for that course, and we will guide you along the way as you do so. In the second semester, our core course is essentially what we call a dissertation companion. It is designed to support you in the journey as you start thinking about your independent original research project in view of undertaking this fully over the summer. And one of the things that students like the most about our program is that it's a very flexible one. It is designed so that you can build it around your own personal interests. So there aren't 2 students who will take the very same courses. These are designed around your own interest, and we will have an advising meeting before the start of the year to tailor this to your own requirements. John, over to you. Okay,
thanks, Shanti. So the MSc in Translation Studies looks quite similar. It's a 1-year program over 3 chunks, as Shanti said. So we have 2 taught semesters and a dissertation. And the MSc in Translation Studies, like the MLitt in Comparative Literature, is designed to be quite flexible. There are 2 core courses. One is Introduction to Translation Studies, which is a theoretical course, and we look at what people have thought and said about translation. So ranging from linguistic theories to cultural theories, to looking at how translators affect the world around them in many ways. Our second core course is Approaches to Translation in the Profession. So this ramps up the professional aspects of the course. So we look at different genres, how one enters the market as a translator, thinking about ethics and sustainability. So alongside these, you'll take a translation workshop, which we call Advanced Translation and Language Skills, or ATLS, in at least one language pair, although you can do two. And we have a range of optional modules that you take alongside those two. So these include media and marketing translation, literary translation, and subtitling. And all of these option courses are designed so that they are both theoretical and practical. So you can, one of the things that you can do in your assessment is do a translation and commentary for all of those, whereas the core courses have more kind of traditional essay structures. So the course is very practical and is very practically oriented, but also offers you all the theoretical background that you would need if you wanted to do further study in translation. And finally, the dissertation can either be a long essay style dissertation or a translation and commentary. And I have to say, most of our students do a translation and commentary because it gives you like a start to a portfolio for professional translation. Okay, so that quickly reminded you of what the programs are and how they work. So what I want to do is ask people, why Glasgow? And what was it about Glasgow that you liked if you came here as a student, or what is it that you like about Glasgow if you work here? So I'm going to start with Julia.
Thank you, John. I think what I like the most about the University of Glasgow is it's this beautiful mix of history, tradition. It's the fourth oldest university in the United Kingdom. And yet at the same time, it is so modern and forward-looking with the courses we offer, with our emphasis on having international students, international perspectives. And so I think it's this really unique balance between history and being forward-looking. And then, of course, the city of Glasgow is so enjoyable in terms of cultural events, restaurants. There's always a lot to do after your day of classes.
Cheers, Julia. Iris, do you want to come in with a student perspective on that?
Yes, I would say my favorite part about being at Glasgow University is definitely the student community that there is there, the kind of support that we give to each other as students. And there's a lot of events organized within the SMLC, but also outside of that in terms of like joining clubs or societies as well. But just as a whole, the bond that we do have amongst the cohort is the nicest thing, and it helps a lot when you're stressed out about your essays to have someone to be able to talk to and support you.
Thanks, Iris. Magda, you were a PhD student here before you became a member of staff. So perhaps you kind of have a longer term perspective on this.
Yeah, right. So what brought me to Glasgow in the first place was the fact that there was a nice range of subjects on offer. So from my point of view, I like the idea that I can engage with translation, with comparative literature, but also bringing in both Polish and Italian into the picture, which are all the kind of subjects that I've been interested in. And then also in terms of more like research-related culture, thinking more about like the post-PhD stage, I found like a nice variety in terms of various research clusters that work on different aspects related to migration, culture, social linguistics as well. And I thought it's a quite a stimulating environment to be in. And on top of that, Glasgow as a city to live in is great. It has a lot on offer in terms of cultural events. And if someone is interested in music, there are lots of music-related events happening as well around the city, including live music. So I feel like it's a really nice place, like in different ways, welcoming.
Thanks, Magda. Chloe.
I came from London with my undergrad, and Glasgow really drew me in from both the city-wise. It just feels like a very welcoming city, but also the university. It's The university is also very welcoming, as Iris was saying about the strong student community. We're in the library at the moment, and it's just nice to know that we have that support from each other. And the wide range of subjects available as a CompLitt student is really beneficiary. So I've been able to take some translation courses as a comparative literature student, and I think that's only strengthened my understanding of CompLitt and my enjoyment of the subject as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chloe. I was going to say, I think on both programs there is the space to take courses from around the College of Arts. And some of my translation students have been taking things on like film archiving or journalism, because that was their area of interest. And so they were like, oh, there's a course. It's not possible every year to do everything, but it's definitely one of the strengths, I think, of the way that Glasgow is set up, is that there is that opportunity to take things from other places. And also you see that in the classroom, where you have students not just from your discipline in your courses. So like Chloe, I think you took out the media and marketing course. And so we had students from CompLitt, we had students from linguistics. Quite often on subtitling, we have students from film studies. And I think that really helps today generate a really interesting and engaging discussion, and people bring in all their different perspectives. Shanti, going back to the original question, what is it that you like about Glasgow?
Well, first of all, I came to Glasgow as a postdoctoral researcher, and I came specifically because of the close symbiotic relationship between comparative literature and translation studies at Glasgow, which is also one of the reasons that draws many of our students. Like Julia said, the bustle of Glasgow, both on campus and in the city, but also the connection between the old and new, was always a big draw for me, as my specialism in research is to work with pre-modern collections. So I do a lot of work with Glasgow University Library Special Collections, which is located at level 12 in the library. And if you ever happen to be in town, please do visit level 12 and enjoy the amazing view of the campuses and Glasgow and all of its surrounds from up there. One of my favorite places on campus.
On the subject of that symbiotic relationship Shanti mentioned between translation studies and comparative literature, we also have a brand new research centre that is launching next month, which is the Research Centre for Comparative Literature and Translation. So it's going to be a really exciting hub of research events, and we're also working towards securing international partnerships with other research centres. So this is really going to enhance the research experience at Glasgow and that symbiotic relationship, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say, and that symbiotic relationship happens in teaching as well. Where if you're studying comparative literature, Magda or I show up and teach a class on translation, and our translation students often talk about very similar things to comparative literature students, and we try as a department to set up postgraduate events that bring everybody together. So I think I should answer this question as well now. So what I like about Glasgow University is it has a really nice group of individuals who work there. I like working with my colleagues, and I think that feeds into teaching as well. The people that work there are committed to teaching, committed to research, and it's a nice environment to be in. People are doing interesting things. We have lots and lots. Every day there seems to be some sort of research event happening across the university, and it's I find it very welcoming. There's times when I've gone to stuff in anthropology, or we've had people from film studies come and talk to us, or so there's a lot of interdisciplinary movement and a lot of openness to people taking part in all of those events. And those events are also open to master's students. And, if you wanted to, you could be doing something every day. The city of Glasgow is also, as everybody said, it's really welcoming, it's really friendly. I live in the suburbs, so I don't quite experience so much of the bustle and so on. There are quite quiet bits of Glasgow as well, and surprisingly leafy bits. But yeah, it's a nice city to be in. It's not huge, but it's big enough that there's plenty to do. So we had some questions sent in by an applicant, Albina Albi. And we're going to do these slightly out of sequence because some of them were more generic than others. So Albina's first question was, what sort of support is there for applying for a PhD and for getting funding to do a PhD? So Shanti, did you want to take that one for comparative literature?
Yeah, so the first and main answer to the question really is that we tailor that support depending each year on a specific cohort's interest and aims and objectives. And that will be another question that you will be asked at our induction meeting. What are your plans in the longer term, so that we can tailor that support as we go forward in the academic year. We have support in place in semester 1, and often this takes the form or the shape of a joint workshop together with the MSc program with our graduate school convener in the School of Modern Languages and Cultures, as they are the person in place to support applications for PhD within the school more widely. Generally, this addresses in the first instance the Scottish consortium competition for scholarships, which is called SAGSA. And that competition opens in the autumn and has a number of deadlines. So we work on that, and then in the second semester, your core course is tailored specifically to support you in that process. And Julia might say a few words about this in a moment. But that is a process that many of our students from past cohorts have found particularly successful and helpful in the process of applying for PhD scholarships in later years. Julia.
Yes, so our semester 2 core course, as Shanti mentioned earlier, it's designed to support you in writing your dissertation, but it also looks further. It's supporting you towards thinking about how might your dissertation be the basis of a PhD project. And we really tackle all aspects that you need to think about to write a competitive, not only PhD application, but funding application for your PhD. So we help you think about what are the big research questions you're asking, how is your corpus, useful to exploring these questions, but also how would you communicate your research to a wider public? So it's really a range of issues. And that course is co-taught. You have every session 2 lecturers. So this semester it was Dr. Paul Castro and I teaching it. And so you get that dual support, the insights from both of us, constant feedback on your projects in process, and you get to ask questions, but also learn from your peers. And actually I'd be keen to hear from Iris and Chloe, since they were both in this class.
Yeah, I can confirm what Julie said completely. The course being there in the second semester I found extremely helpful with preparing for our dissertation project, from developing the ideas to, turning the idea into our concrete own research project, but also with looking ahead towards preparing for our PhD applications if we are interested. So it's been a really helpful resource to have in the course. And yeah.
I would completely agree. It's really useful. It's a key resource, I think, and it really encourages us to look at our dissertations and see how we can expand them. And it really does, I think, at least at this point in my academic career, it set us up well for the next steps by forcing us to look at how we can expand on projects and looking at how the PhD application process is set up and using current projects for that process, which then feeds back into our dissertations.
Okay, thanks, Chloe. For translation studies, it's a little bit less formal because many of our students go on to become professional translators or to work in various forms of interlinguistic mediation. We don't have a formal research methods program or research design class. We do have a supporting program throughout the year. So every Thursday afternoon we have, every Tuesday afternoon, we have a class that offers a mixture of academic skills, talks from translators, employability skills. And through that, we talk about how to design research projects, thinking about going on to do future work. And I would say, we say to our students throughout, if you're interested in doing a PhD, please come talk to us. And we're very happy to talk people through the process of applying, help people develop research proposals and research designs. We, like comparative literature, we're also eligible for SIGSA funding. And a lot of our current PhD students have come in on Chinese Scholarship Council funding, which is competitive, but Glasgow supports. So it's quite, it's nice funding if you can get it. Magda, do you want to add anything to that?
Maybe it's worth mentioning, although I do not have the detailed information, like sometimes we also have scholarships available through the college. And this is actually the one I personally had. So it was very helpful, like in supporting like me financially throughout like the PhD process.
A small thing to add for MLitt, which John reminded me of in a sense is, well, of course, not all of our students go on to do a PhD. And for me, the value in learning to work with a funding application as a form of text is also about learning how to pitch your academic or otherwise writing to different types of setting and circumstances, and it will be useful to you whether you go on to undertaking a PhD or not.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, a lot of the things that we do at a master's degree or at PG level are that they adapt to different situations in lots of ways. So a lot of what both programs are doing are really helping you kind of understand your place in the world and how you can affect the world around you, even if it looks as if sometimes you're just reading books or translating technical manuals. So a second question was about the Sterling Maxwell Center, which is a research center within the School of Modern Languages and Cultures, which works on text-image relations. And so Abina asked, what sort of interactions might you have with that as an MLitt student? So I think this is also valid for the other research groups and research centers, including the new Center for Comparative Literature and Translation. So all events are open to Glasgow students and the public more generally. So there's always an opportunity to take part in things that are happening around you, as we said earlier. But are there kind of more specific ways that you can interact with those centers? Shanti or Julia, could you talk about that in the
I mean, one example I can give where our graduate students were very involved. We had a guest lecture from Nicholas Royal, who's the author of a textbook that we use for Introduction to Critical Theory at undergraduate level. And so the graduate students were very involved in helping organize his visit, being present the day of the event, and then going out for dinner with him. And this is the point I was going to make. It's actually really good networking for you as a graduate student. If you go to these events, you can usually meet either before or afterwards the guest speaker, and that can, just the conversation itself can be inspiring for your research, but also later on, if you're thinking of a PhD, you might then want to go on and work with them. So I think those opportunities in themselves are quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, actually, the fact that by hearing about people's research, not only you are inspired and hear about different ways of working within our field, but you also get a sense as to how much you like the way a particular scholar works. Some of our research clusters and centers also have regular work in progress meetings, for example, which are a very good way for you to see how academic work professionally develops from early stages to completed pieces of work. And we generally have within our various induction activities and events a showcase with research centers and clusters in the School of Modern Languages and Cultures. But we very much encourage you to think of research events as an integral part of your academic pathway with us.
Thanks, Shanti. Iris and Chloe, have you taken the opportunity to attend any of these events or take part in any of the like research events taking place?
I attended a couple of guest lectures last term, which were really enjoyable. I unfortunately haven't had the chance this term, but I do know that I would get a lot out of them if I had the time to attend.
Yeah, I've tried my best to attend most of the ones been organized by the school, and I found them really helpful, as well as Julie was mentioning, for sort of meeting other researchers and other students as well, and talking to them. That's been really helpful, apart from, the inspiration from our own research and, the knowledge that you did gain out of them. So yeah, as a whole, they're really good experiences.
Okay, thanks everyone. We've got a question in the chat that I think we should kind of fits with what we've been talking about now. So Shahad asks, for the Comparative Literature MLitt program, are there any optional modules or courses that I could take that teach cultural studies? Shanti, do you want to answer that?
Yes, I would say that cultural studies is integral to the way we teach comparative literature in general. So you will be thinking about the cultural dimension throughout your core courses, not just your optional courses. I cannot think of a course that is specifically conceived as cultural studies per se. It's just a core component of how we work in practice. Julia, do you have anything to add on this?
I think so much of what we do is cultural, right? So on our MLitt, we have courses like Transnational Constructions of Gender, which is asking you to think of how gender is experienced and thought of in different societies. Or we have a course that's an introduction to post-colonial studies. I mean, all these comparative literature courses are deeply cultural. So you always, even if you're looking at work of literature, you're thinking of a wider culture, and you're also thinking of a culture that inspired that work of literature. So like you said, Shanti, for me, the cultural dimension is always present, really.
Yeah, thank you both. I was going to say it's the same for translation studies. We very much talk about cultural studies topics of like race and gender and sexuality as part of our ongoing discussion of translation, and how those topics are significant reference points for your practice as a translator. So there may not be cultural studies as a separate course, but cultural studies tends to be very much embedded in there. And I think if you're thinking of like, certain key authors like Stuart Hall or Homi Bhabha or those type of kind of cultural studies authors, you will encounter those throughout the different courses across the programs. So that leads us to teaching load, which is one of Albina's questions. So she asks what the course load is and whether or not it's possible to do any language courses alongside. So for course load, for translation studies, you'll typically have 6 to 8 hours of contact time a week during taught time. It is a full-time program. Many of our students work alongside it in part-time jobs. And you'd be doing 3 different courses or modules a semester. Each one has a certain amount of reading and preparation. So it is doable. It is possible to do it full time and have a part-time job along the side, but it's still quite busy. I think comparative literature is quite similar.
Yes, it is. And definitely we recommend that students do not underestimate preparation time, and the master programs in general work at their best when everyone comes to class having done their work, as we then really create a hub to discuss all the ideas that come with your reading.
Iris and Chloe, do you want to say something about how that, because we as academics go, the workload is normal, it's perfectly fine. How does it feel to you as students?
If you don't mind me going first. Yeah, I think it's important to not underestimate, as you said, the time that it takes to actually prepare for each of our seminars, because even though I, for example, normally only had about 6 contact hours per week, it takes a lot more than those 6 hours to prepare for the courses. So while it is definitely possible to have a part-time job or take other language courses at the same time, time management is an important skill to have when it comes to masters.
Chloe, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I have worked part-time throughout the entire course so far, and whilst it is possible, it is definitely something to keep in mind of your ability to juggle contact hours, the hours needed for prep work, and your job as well. It can be done. It's just a lot of work which definitely should be kept in mind. But it is very beneficial to do. You need to do the prep work to really get the most out of it. So it is important to figure out how you're best going to manage that.
Okay, thank you both. So the other question was about language learning, around the programs. So correct me if I'm wrong on this, Shanti, but for both the MSc and the MSc Translation Studies and the MLitt Comparative Literature, it's possible to take classes that are already taught within the School of Modern Languages and Cultures as an option, so that you can they're credit bearing. And it's also possible to take language for international mobility courses, which has a different range of languages. However, they're not normally within the master's programs themselves. So there was a really specific question that I will pass to Julia about Persian. So I think Albina is interested in Persian and Farsi. And she was asking, could I research in this area? what sort of language support is available. So Julia is our resident Persian specialist. So this is why you're going to have to address this one, I think.
Of course, John. So we don't offer Persian language classes. However, if you want to work on Persian literature, i.e. literature originally written in Persian from Greater Iran area, you can definitely do this. You can do this as part of your semester 1 core course, where in the essay you sort of apply your choice of theory to a text of your choice. And more importantly, you can do it in your dissertation, and I'd be delighted to support such a dissertation. I would also mention that as an MLitt student, you can take some of our honours courses. Chloe took one, which she can tell you more about in a moment. But I teach in semester 2 an honours course called Writing Persia, which is all about how Iran has historically been seen, represented in the West. And we end with a novel Disoriental by the French-Iranian author Negar Javadi. And in fact, she even joined the class over Zoom to do a Q&A with the students. So I would really encourage you to take that course. In terms of, if you're concerned about your ability with Persian language, I mean, at master's level, it's completely fine to work with translations. You can always use, English language translations as a support. So that's feasible. And then you might also want to think of how there's a huge culture of Iranian diaspora literature. Negar Javadi is an example in French, but there's a lot of literature in English, Dutch, other languages written by authors originally from Iran. So that could possibly be another way in which you work on literature that has to do with Iran without using the Persian language.
Chloe, did you want to say something about the honours course that you took?
Yeah, it was, I took, I can't remember the full title of it. It was Myths. I think it was
Myths and the Modern Imagination.
Yeah, Myths and the Modern Imagination. Thank you, Julia. It was really fascinating, and I really enjoyed being able to be in a classroom with undergraduate students as well. It was such a big class compared to the master's classes that I've been in. The current CompLitt cohort is 5 of us, I believe. And so being able to be in a room with a large amount of students again was really valuable, and being able to it was a really valuable experience, and I would definitely recommend doing at least one honours course if you decide to do the master's.
Okay, cheers, Chloe. We have a language-specific question coming from the chat. So Sumbahan asks, are we running English to Chinese translation this year? So we have a group that is, so the translation workshops are obviously language specific and even direction specific. So you normally translate into the stronger of your 2 languages, or the stronger of your languages. So we'll have different classes, for instance, between English to Spanish and Spanish to English. And we have a class that is translating English into Chinese this year and most years. So I hope that answers that question, because whenever we talk about language directions for translation, we have to be really specific about into or out of. But yeah, there's definitely English to Chinese this year. And so what Chloe has mentioned was something that I wanted to talk about a little bit, about class sizes and cohort size. So you mentioned that the MLitt in comparative literature has a cohort of about 5 or 6, but class sizes tend to be slightly different to that, because you have people from different courses, different programs taking those. So what's Julia, what typically would a comparative literature class look like? What sort of numbers would it be?
So for the core first semester and second semester course, you'll have in semester 1 the 5 or 6 comparative literature students, and then maybe 3 or 4 other students from other courses who are taking our core course as an optional course or auditing it. And then again, when you're doing your optional courses, it can vary a lot, because they're open to other graduate students. So you might have students, in film studies or English or creative writing or other subjects joining our comparative literature students. So the smallest group is semester 2, the core course where we really guide you in preparing the dissertation. So that's sort of 5 or 6. And that works quite well because we do very in-depth discussions of each student's project. And we obviously would not have time to do that if it was a bigger class size. But then when you're doing other classes, it might be bigger groups of, maybe 10 people. Iris and Chloe, what sort of class sizes did you have in your optional courses? Maybe you can give some examples.
Personally, I haven't taken any honors courses. I've just been taking the postgrad ones, and my class size is ranged anywhere between 3 of us on a module to 20 of us, depending on what the course was. For example, we had quite a small class in the reading workshop in comparative literature course in the first semester, because that's the type of course that mostly comparative literature students would be interested in. But for example, in the module called Transnational Constructions of Gender, you have students from a lot of master's programs, such as from CompLitt, from translation, but also from the History of Gender program. And that's really nice because you get a lot of different perspectives there as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I have been, most of my courses have been 5 or higher. So I think the largest course I took was the marketing and translation, which I think was about 20 or so of us. I'm not 100% sure.
18.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
I convened the course. So I know precisely how we had 18.
Yeah. And so so that was the biggest master's course, and then the undergraduate course was a bit more than that. And having different class sizes is really beneficial. And yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chloe. Magda, do you want to say a little bit about how teaching works on the MSc Translation Studies?
Yeah, so in terms of the student group, when it comes to the core courses or like compulsory courses, we have about 26 students. But then when it comes to language-specific combinations, those groups tend to be smaller because they are based on your language. So it could go anywhere from between, let's say, 2 to maybe 13. Depending on how many students are working in each language combination. In terms of the teaching style, on the translation studies courses, but I think it also applies to comparative literature, we like to mix a bit like a lecture seminar teaching style, so that we have like students engaged in relevant discussions in each class, and we can think like together like in smaller groups or like as a bigger group about different issues that we are like discussing in each class.
Yeah, thanks, Magda.
That's maybe an important point to pick up on for students who come from other cultures. So graduate teaching here, it's for students leading the discussion. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear how you react to what your instructor says, but also what your peers say. So it's not like, in some countries where you sort of just sit back and the lecturer speaks and you listen. Mm-hmm. It's very interactive, and we really value hearing your thoughts and seeing you share your reactions to the course material.
Yeah, I would say, having watched several cohorts, people get that very quickly. Within the first couple of weeks, you realize, oh, I should be talking to the people next to me. And it can be, yeah, if you're coming, there are certain cultures which are much more kind of instructor focused. The British system in Glasgow especially, I think, is very student focused, especially at postgraduate level. So thinking about this, and teaching and coming to do a master's, I mean, one of the questions that we often get is about employability, and so how do the courses incorporate employability? What sort of things do people go on to do afterwards? So Shanti, do you want to say a little bit about that in relation to comparative literature, please?
Yeah, so much of our course being very theoretical, it doesn't explicitly lead you into graduate attributes, but it does actively build graduate attributes nevertheless. We diversify our assessment so that you learn to communicate effectively in different ways. We encourage group work in selected courses so that you learn to collaborate effectively. And each year we develop small workshops or seminars on specific elements. And one of the key things that Julia has done, for example, is the reflection of how we communicate academic information to non-academic audiences. And that's something that is the focus of semester 2. I don't know if maybe in a bit you want to say something about that, Julia. The main thing to leave you with is that while we work academically, we are also supported throughout your studies and for 2 years after you graduate by the career service. And we encourage you that you actively engage with that service, both as a student and as an alumnus or alumna.
Thank you, Shanti. Yes, so as we mentioned, in semester 2, we do a lot of reflection on how to prepare competitive PhD application, funding application. And these days, one of the things we expect it to do is explain how you would communicate your research to a non-academic audience, which can be very challenging if you've not done it before, no matter how old or young you are. You know, this is perhaps not something that comes naturally if you're used to being by yourself in a library reflecting deeply. But I've been fortunate enough to do a training scheme called the BBC Radio Free New Generation Thinkers scheme. And so I've had a lot of training and experience of presenting my research to non-academic audiences. And so with Shanti, we've tried to integrate that into the teaching so that I can share with you some of the tips and techniques I've picked up from that.
Thanks, both of you. Mike, did you want to speak a little bit about employability on the Translation Studies program?
Yeah, sure. So on the one hand, the practical side of translation is incorporated into like the different courses that we teach throughout the academic year, but also more specifically in semester 2, we like as part of our workshops that we offer alongside the core course, we also have these workshops that deal specifically with working as a freelance. We also have a session that is delivered specifically for translation studies students by career services. So we reflect a lot like on this practical side of translation and the industry, especially towards the end of the course. And it's also worth keeping in mind that career services offer like a number of different events that are related to like, you know, working in different sectors, including like language services, but also they do offer more like personally tailored like advice on whether it's on CV, on like looking out for career opportunities.
Thanks, Magda. I would say from anecdotally, our students, you know, the students go on to all sorts of jobs. And we do invite students back to come and talk about that experience, to talk to, you know, the new cohort of, you know, how did the masters pan out for them, and what do they wish they knew in week 2 that they didn't know in week 2, which often seems to be the same things every year. But I mean, they've gone into video game localization, into translating patents, various people going into language services, but I think we've also had people go on to graduate internships and graduate recruitment programs. So it's not just translating, but also a wide range of like intercultural activities. Is that something that you find that is similar on the on the MLitt CompLitt?
I think that's exactly the case there as well. And the fact comparative studies in general opens reflections across a number of cultures, of media, of cultural productions, which means, for example, that students are very well placed to work in the publishing industry or in the cultural industry more general.
Yeah, cheers, Shanti. Yes, I was going to say that's similar with translation studies as well. We have another question from Albina, which I'm going to also have to direct to Julia, because it's specifically about Persian. And Albina asks, for someone interested in Persian literature but having only a beginner's knowledge of the language, is it a hurdle to write in a dissertation, or is having expertise in language preferable?
Hi, Albina. So like I said earlier, if you're not, confident with your Persian, if you're still beginner stage, it's absolutely fine to use a translation to support yourself. So, what does that look like? Say you want to write your dissertation on Sa'di's Golistan, you read the English translation, then you decide what are the examples I want to use. Okay, I want to look at book 2, paragraph 3, and then you can go back to the Persian and read it very slowly, cross-reference with the translation, and pick out the close reading elements, right? That's absolutely allowed. When you go on to PhD level, it is expected that you can work from the original, but at master's level, it's absolutely fine to be using the translation as a guide. And maybe Chloe, you want to comment, because Chloe does not work on Persian, she works in classics. However, she is often working through translations. So maybe you can say a few words on how you're doing that.
Yeah, so my dissertation, I will be using the Odyssey. I have done some ancient Greek, not enough to read the original to any degree of competency. So I'm being very specific about which translation I'm using. I'm very lucky in that the Odyssey has been translated by so many different translators. So I'm being very specific about which translator I'm using, and making sure that it's serving the purposes that I need it to, and where I need to, I am able to go and look at the original text with my very little knowledge of ancient Greek, but it is enough that I can get by. I don't think you need to have a fluency in the language, at least at this stage, which is mildly harder with ancient Greek, I would say, to achieve. But it is definitely possible to do your dissertation using a primary text that isn't in a language that you are fluent in or close to fluency. It just takes a bit more work, and you just need to be a bit more conscious of what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Chloe. So Albina, I think all that Chloe just said would completely apply to your case with Persian. And I'd be happy to supervise the dissertation, it goes without saying.
Yeah, thanks both. And this also kind of shows you the links between the disciplines, where translation literacy is really important to comparative literature, and translation in some ways is part of comparative literature, although it's also separate. And it's one of very confusing situations where we kind of overlap but don't overlap. So we're going to be finishing in a few minutes. I wanted to ask a question. What do you think makes either comparative literature or translation studies, the discipline that you're working in, exciting and enjoyable at the moment? Shanti.
Things are very exciting at Glasgow in particular. The first reason for us is the center we are just about to launch, which Julia mentioned, and a lot of different events and activities that take place in Glasgow in general. For me, the most exciting thing really is meeting the new cohort every year, because our course revolves so much around your own personal individual interests that every year we have a completely different experience with it. So we look forward to seeing you in Glasgow.
Okay, thank you, Shanti. Chloe.
I think it's really exciting. I came from a classic background, which is why my dissertation is focusing on the Odyssey, but being able to use that background and come to a new subject, which throughout this past year I've realized actually isn't that different. Comparison isn't everything, and it's been really nice to have the opportunity to further that that line of exploration and to have the support from lecturers to explore that further.
Cheers, thank you, Chloe. Magda.
Yeah, so I think what makes translation really enjoyable and interesting is the fact that there is a range of texts that you can engage with, going from legal and medical texts to prose, poetry, and children's literature. And also, like, you have a number of possibilities in terms of the different perspectives which you apply to actually study translation. So including but also going beyond, like linguistics based approaches, like through cultural perspective, but also like reflecting on like the importance and social cultural role that translation plays like in everyday life.
No, thanks, Magda. Iris.
I think the thing that I've been enjoying the most about my time studying in Glasgow has been how I've been able to sort of tailor the program to my interests, not only with the interests that I came in with at the start of the program, but especially I would say as they evolved throughout the course of the program. And yeah, just finding new things that I'm interested in and just the things that I've been able to learn with the other members of the cohort, learning from their interests as well as from the professors and members of staff in general.
Okay, thanks, Iris. Julia, I've not asked you yet, have I? No.
Yeah, no, you haven't. At Glasgow specifically, I mean, we have a motto of the City of Glasgow, which is "People make Glasgow." So it definitely feels like that. The SMLC, the School of Modern Languages and Cultures, we have such amazing colleagues, both colleagues who've been around for a while, but also a lot of new colleagues who've recently started. So at a time where in a lot of other universities, you feel like modern languages is perhaps shrinking, at Glasgow, we felt like we've been growing, and then that's more people to teach on our comparative literature courses. So that's been really exciting. And in the discipline more widely, I think the last years people are more and more interested in thinking about literary comparisons across Europe, but also not Europe, looking beyond the West. And so that's something I do in my own work in connecting Persian literature and European literature. And so I think it's a really exciting time to be working in this field.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think similar things to everybody else. I mean, I'm in translation studies. I mean, what keeps me interested in it is, like Magda says, the variety of things that you can look at and the variety of approaches you can take, and the fact that translation opens up ways of talking about the intersections between cultures and identities in some really interesting ways that are also very tangible and textually based. So I think that is it for us. If you have any more really specific questions, please feel free to email Shanti and Julia about the MLitt CompLitt, or Magda and I about the MSc Translation Studies. And we can answer sort of more technical questions or more very specific questions about how those programs work. And we're happy to, we're very happy to talk to you in kind of more personal ways about the programs and about life in Glasgow. So thank you everybody so much for coming along and for talking and for sharing your experiences. We hope those of you listening have enjoyed this and found it useful. It's certainly been interesting for us to get to talk like this, because we don't always get about all of these things. So thank you very much for today.